we're pleased to get to share with you this afternoon. We have Sue with us, we have Chantel with us, we have Dr. Liz with us, and we have Mary with us, and we have Dr. Maddie with us, and her friends call her Maddie, I understand. And so we're going to share a little bit about their stories with you, and then give you an opportunity to ask some questions and us visit amongst ourselves and share some things that are important to us. So I'm going to, since you sat on the end, Sue, you'll know better than to sit there next time, huh? I'm going to start out by sharing a little bit of your story with your permission, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So, Sue Pullman's entry into ranching was made possible by her great friend and mentor, Dave Williams, who taught her to fix equipment, put up hay, and care for animals. Sounds like how I grew up. Except I had tobacco in mine. With his training and his belief in her abilities, Sue was ready to take on a male-dominated service departments, which you have to work with for the equipment, the parts departments, and salespeople, who she pulled kicking and screaming into the 21st century. That deserves applause. She has successfully managed her own cattle ranch for 23 years now. One particular calving season saw the worst weather in 30 years, with temperatures of -30 and 40 degrees, which you all can identify with. They persisted for 2 weeks. With calves being born every 2 hours around the clock, the herd had to be checked every hour on the hour. With the support of her husband and 2 young cowboys, Sue kept every calf alive during this terrible time, and she keeps on going strong. So I have a question for you. Whenever you're going through those times like that, what is it that you pull from inside yourself that are positive? And we'll hand you a microphone.
Oh, I have a microphone.
Oh, you were hiding the microphone. So what do you pull from inside yourself, Sue? What positive coping skills do you use to get through those times?
This is hard.
Let me ask you a different question,
Okay.
okay? And we'll come back to that one.
Think about it.
Okay. What do other people do that you've mentioned your mentor and your husband and young cowboys? What do other people do to help you? What are some of the positive things that they do that can be helpful to you during times like this?
You know, the people that are around me that support me are amazing. My husband and our children are grown, but they come back and help when things really get rough. And like this last calving season, they were actually friends of my son who was in college, but they came back and helped during that calving season, and just the support that they give, and I don't know, they believe in me, and they believe in hard work.
It takes it to do what you do.
It does. Anyway, oh man, I really don't have enough words for it, but anyway, I just think that the people that surround me, they believe in me, and I don't necessarily think that it's just me, it's just the whole idea of the ranching culture that people help each other out.
And what would we do without you?
Oh. What would we do without them helping?
And so we've heard the term used a few times today that people just show up. And what you just said seems to go along with that too. Just the support of knowing that people are there, whether they necessarily do something or not. Just knowing that they're willing to show up and be supportive. How meaningful is that to you and what you do?
Right. Well, the calving season, that was this spring. That was so hard, and I really thought that I wasn't gonna be able to do it. We normally calve in March, the beginning of March, and we had 2 feet of snow on the ground. It got so cold, we had to bring the entire herd of cows in. You can stop me, I always have
No.
long stories.
Go right
Anyway,
on.
we had to bring all the cows in a spot where we normally just have 20. So we have about 160, 170 cows. We have straw, hay, 2 feet of snow, so we can't even open the gates. If you can understand, like how you're trying to open gates and there's 2 feet of snow and you're trying to hurry, so you're trying to shovel, you do all this. The first cow, something's wrong with her. We're like, okay, we gotta go in. We pull the calf. And my husband's taking the day off work. We pull the calf. We have what we call a little calf ambulance. And it's just a sled, right? And so we put the calf in the calf ambulance, and he's dragging it to the calving shed where we have some straw, and it's just a little bit out of the shed. I think the wind chill was about 5 below zero. And I said, okay, well, I'll just clean up the chains and everything, and I'll bring the cow, so then we can get the cow and the baby back together. So I pick up the chains and I turn around, and there's another set of hooves. I'm like, oh my God, twins, right? So we pull the second calf. And they're both huge calves anyway, so I just pick up the calf and throw it in the back of the truck and just bring it up to our garage, because there's no way this mom's gonna be able to do both. But anyway, so that's our first emergency. And then my husband takes the weekend off. He was supposed to travel. I'm looking at the weather, it's just gonna be terrible, and I'm not kidding. This is when you don't know what you're gonna do. I am like sitting in bed, looking at the weather on my phone, crying. It's like, I can't do this by myself. I can't do this by myself. And that was when my friend's son called me up and said, do you need some help calving? I'm like, heck yes. And so he came with his friend, and I said, I'll be around the clock. And I just moved them in to the house.
Awesome.
So,
Perfect.
and we just put on our stuff, and every hour on the hour we went down and checked the calves and hauled the calves in and brought them up to the hot box, and we were exhausted, but we kept them alive.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. Maddie, with your permission, I'm going to read just a little bit about your story, okay?
Sure.
An immigrant from Liberia, West Africa, who initially came to America at the age of 16 in 1983 on a foreign exchange program. Maddie graduated from Helena High School in 1984. Less than 10 years later, Maddie and her husband, Wilmot Collins, fled Liberia's bloody civil war on a cargo vessel, finding themselves homeless and starving refugees in the country of Ghana. Through the hard work of her Helena family, her Helena host family, she was granted a nursing scholarship from Carroll College and returned to Helena in 1991, 2 months pregnant. She and her husband were separated for 2 years and 7 months before he was granted a refugee visa to join his family in the United States. It's hard to even read, Maddie. Maddie Collins has now been a practicing registered nurse for over 24 years. Talk about giving back. Presently, she works as a staff nurse at the VA hospital, where she has been practicing since 2001 upon becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen. Maddie is also currently serving in the U.S. Army Reserves, where she has risen to the rank of captain in the Army Nurse Corps. She recently graduated this August and obtained her doctorate in nursing practice. I'll let you take the mic, Maddie. And is it on?
Can you hear me? Okay.
It helps to be able to hear yourself, doesn't it? So if you would, talk a little bit about your host family and coming here and some of the strengths that you drew on during that time.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for having me. I want to do a disclaimer first. She gave my age, right? And tell her the year.
I noticed that.
If she's 29, I'm 19.
Yeah. You've got it. You've got it.
So let me just gonna wrap this story up real quick here, make it short as I can. So when I was 16 years old, before I was 16 years old, we had the first military coup in Liberia in 1980. And I don't know how many of you know about Liberia, but it is a West African country that was founded when the emancipation of slavery happened. So they formed this country in West Africa and called it Liberia, meaning liberty, for the free slaves to go back to in West Africa. So Liberia has a lot of similarities to America. We have pretty much the same flag, except we have, I think we have 13 stripes here. We have 11 in Liberia for the 11 women that signed the Declaration of Independence. And then 1 star, meaning the lone state, the first African republic. And then it's red, white, and blue, similar. So we're familiar with the American culture, so to speak. But within that, like we had the Native Americans here, Liberia also had Native Liberians there that were already there when the settlers went there. So to make a long story short, the immigrants that came from America and went to Liberia took the dominant culture of English speaking, the American way of life, and they called them American Liberians. But it kind of blended together and Liberia became one country. Until 1980, we had the first military coup. I was about 13 years old, I was in 8th grade. I lost my father and I became very devastated. So going from an A student, I went down to probably C and D's in an all-girls Catholic school. And I had an older brother that came to me and said, Maddie, if you can bring your grades back up, you always want to go to America, right? I said, yeah. He said, well, you get back on the honor roll and I'll send you to America on an exchange program. So that was all I needed, So I went back and got on the honor roll, and when I got into 11th grade, I told my brother, it's the time. It's called American Field Service. And he said, well, go and apply and see what happens. And I applied through the Ministry of Education in Liberia, and they granted me an interview. And at the interview, I'm an introvert, and there are several of us on this stage that are introverts, right? So I was really shy, and when I went to that interview, the ladies that did the interview said, you need to get out. She needs to go. Besides the grades, they saw how timid I was, how shy I was. And so I got to come on the exchange program. And Montana was the state selected for me, and they kind of blend you with a family. So they blended me with the Naksham family, and today they're my family. So I came to them. They had a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I was 16. So automatically my sister and I kind of had a riffraff because I took her spot. But it was a great experience. The brother had no problem. I was there to buffer his sister. And I'll tell you a funny story real quick before I get to that. But Mom and Dad had gone out that evening, and Jamie splattered Nathan with some water. So he came to me and he said, Maddie, Jamie splattered me with water. And I went there and I said, Jamie, you need to tell Nathan you're sorry. And she said, no, I'm just 16, we're just kids, And I said, you need to tell him you're sorry, you don't do that. And she said, no. So I said, okay, Nathan, are you ready? He said, yes. We picked Jamie up and we took her to the kitchen set and we gave her a bath. And then after that, we gave her towels and said, now clean up the mess before Mom and Dad gets home. And then she told Nathan she was sorry. So right there, I knew that was my family. So fast forward, after I finished the exchange program in '84, I graduated and went back to Liberia, went to college and got a degree in biology and chemistry, and got into medical school. But while in medical school, the Civil War broke out, 1989, and it was a pretty bloody Civil War. I met my husband now, Wilmot, he's the mayor of the city, and we were dating, and we said, this war, we're going to stay here and see it to the end. We're 22-year-olds, so less than my son's age, and he's my youngest right now. So we said, we're not leaving Liberia, we're going to see this thing to the end. Furthermore, America had tried to intervene by asking the fighting parties they were going to grant the president amnesty to get out of the country, but he refused. So the civilians got caught up in the Civil War in between the points. So going from we're going to stay came to when the hell can we get out of here? So going through a lot of anarchy, chaos, the country lost power. We got separated from families. My mother left the country. We asked her to leave because we thought it would be best. And oldest brother in the Seychelles. She went there. So we're separated from family, it's just all over. And so it was September of 1990 when they had killed the president at that time. It was still bloody anarchy. And the West African countries got together and said, we have to help Liberia. So they put together a peacekeeping force, and that peacekeeping force started sending vessels for Liberians who want to get out with the rest of the nationals. And so Wilma and I decided it was so bad, we were starving and we were ready to get out. And fortunately, we were at the part of Liberia near the American embassy that had the ships coming. It was near the port of Liberia. So we got to the port and got on a vessel. We stayed in the port, I think, 3 days, and then got on the vessel. Fortunately, it was a cargo vessel. There were 10,000 refugees on that vessel. And we decided amongst ourselves, my husband was working in Liberia at that time at SOS Children's Village, similar to Intermountain Children's Home, but not that kind of abusive. It was more for kids that didn't have parents or were less fortunate in society. So it wasn't the abuse part, but they were poor. So it was similar to that. So when we got to Ghana on that vessel, we decided we're going to go to SOS Children's Village, and they accepted us, and we got there. And fast forward again, through my host family, the Knocksheims, we called them, right? So was this the aha moment? Am I supposed to talk about that?
Please.
So the aha moment for me was, Wilma was 90 pounds, I was 87 pounds. We were pretty much, when we look in the mirror, when we got in Ghana, we're like, holy smokes, we are dying. The jaws were sunken in, the collarbones were sharp. But SOS Children's Village opened their arms and just took us in, the whole family, all of us that got on that vessel and got there. And then I told Wilma, I said, Wilma, I think there's more to life than getting handouts. So let me call Mom and Dad. And he's like, Mom and Dad, yeah, I got family in America. And so I wish my mom was here, and I wish I had invited her. I didn't think about it beforehand to honor her, because that was my aha moment. When I called Mom, her mom picked up the phone, Gammy, we called her, and she said, oh, Maddie, we have been waiting for this call. Because they had the Red Cross looking for me. They had kept the telephone number. They moved out of the city and went on to Austin Road, Bird's Eye, out somewhere there. But they kept the telephone number, hoping that I would contact them. And she said, as soon as Joyce gets from work, I'm going to tell them to call you. So they couldn't call me because they didn't know where. So I said, well, I'll just call the next day. So I called. And I said, Mom, she started crying. I said, we just need some money, to live, because we had nothing. SOS Children's Village put us in areas of interest. I was obviously in the medical field, so they put me in the clinic on the campus, and they put me in the classroom, and they gave us a stipend, and it was enough to maybe buy food for maybe 2 weeks. Not enough, but we were being fed, and we were grateful. But it was like, okay, we're 23, he's 27, it's like, I wake up every morning and like, what else is there? Liberia was still in chaos, it was still fighting. And so when I called Joyce, my mom, and I said, we need some money. She said, oh, honey, we're going to help you with more than that. We're going to help you with your future. So I said, well, I don't know how you're going to do that, because Liberia is pretty upside down right now, and I don't know if the American government's going to grant us visas. And she said, well, what other ways are there for you to come? Let me see if I can get you a student visa. So she went to Carroll College and explained my story to Carroll College. And Carroll granted me, long story short, a full ride scholarship to do nursing. And so we went to the embassy to get the visa. They sent my paper. The program director said, well, you're in Wilmot. At that time, we weren't married, we were engaged. Get married, put him on your I-20, like your dependent, and then you two can come. And we thought it would be that easy. And so we went to the American Embassy in Ghana, and I took my I-20 form, and I was so happy because it was a full ride. And the lady interviewing us, the consulate, said, is your husband going to go with you? And I said, yeah, 23, I'm dumb like nobody's business. And she said, well, what guarantee can you give us that you will come back to your home country? And I said, my word. And she said, oh, well, that's not enough. Do you have family back in Liberia? I said, yeah, we do. Do you have kids? No, we don't. well, I'm sorry, you can't go to our country. And she stamped my passport. Said no. So I went back out and I said, well, I think it's because I said yes, Wilma was gonna come with me, that took that opportunity away. And I went back home and I cried. And then a couple of weeks later, I heard from my mom and she said, Maddie, we're trying to work on something to see if we can get you back. So I said, okay. The next day we get a call from the American consulate in Ghana. Magdalene, can you come back for another interview? Well, what they had done was contact their Conrad Burns, Max Baucus, and Pat Williams to see if they could do diplomacy work. And they did, and they talked to the embassy there. But Wilma and I had prayed and we decided that he was not gonna come with me. And so I went ahead and just, when I went to the interview, another consulate asked me 3 times, is he gonna come with you? And I said, no, he's gonna stay. And so he stayed and got the visa. 2 weeks before I was due to come to America, I got really sick. And we're all women in this room, so I guess I can say, except for the couple of guys filming, that when you go through starvation, the body goes into amenorrhea, right? You don't menstruate. So I didn't know I was pregnant because I had stopped menstruating. So when I got sick, I thought, I got malaria, and I'm gonna go get it treated before I go to America. So I went to the clinic, and they gave me, if you guys are familiar with malaria treatment, chloroquine injection. And fortunately, it didn't do anything to the baby, fortunately. So then 2-3 days, the week before I left, I'm like, let's go back to the clinic. I started vomiting. So went back to the clinic, and then the doctor did a urinalysis and said, congratulations, Mr. Collins, you're gonna be a proud father. And I tell people this story and laugh, because I say if Wilma was white, he would have turned pale. Because his whole face just went, huh? And he turned to me and he said, Maddie, can you do this? And I said, what other options do we have? I said, I'm not gonna throw away that full ride scholarship. I can do it. And so I came to America pregnant. And my second aha moment was when I had my daughter and held her in my arms, and I knew life was gonna be okay. And so today we're in Helena. We have a blessed community. Carroll College was awesome. And I'm just fortunate to be here.
Wow. That's powerful. Chantel. Is it okay if I share your story?
Of course.
Ever an ambitious entrepreneur and businesswoman, Chantel and her husband dreamed of early retirement and adventures, often working 2 and 3 jobs to achieve those goals. However, there's lots of howevers in our lives, aren't there? However, things changed exponentially on her 49th birthday when she received the news that no mother ever wants to hear. Her son was in an accident and would never walk again. As with any parent, Chantel and her husband took their son in and built him a home on their property. Unfortunately, the expenses were more than either of them could have imagined, and consequently, they ended up significantly in debt. Now, more than 2 years later, because of their hard work and frugality, the debt-free financial rainbow is again emerging, and Chantel and her husband are again planning for retirement and dreaming of adventure. Would you share with us maybe about your aha moment whenever you realized that you were going to not just survive, but that thriving is in your future?
Of course. Let me preface this with the phone call I got on my birthday. And actually what had happened was I got a phone call. And it was my son's friend. He said, "Hi Chantel, this is so-and-so. Will you call me?" And I didn't catch it that night, but the next morning is my birthday. And my husband and I are talking, and I see I have a message. Usually I ignore my messages, but this particular time I listened to it. And those words that were spoken to me, I knew something was wrong. Something was catastrophically wrong. So I called my son's number, and another individual answered the phone. And I could hear my son in the background talking and laughing, and I'm thinking, okay. What had happened was he was lane splitting in Los Angeles on the Los Angeles freeway on his motorcycle. For those of you who do not know what that is, because of the heat in California, you are able to go 10 miles per hour over the speed limit and go between the cars. So he's doing this on the freeway, and he sees this car kind of doing this in front of him, doesn't really think much about it. Gets up next to her and can see she's very distracted with her cell phone. She's texting, not watching the road, and she starts pushing him over into another lane of traffic. And he actually kicks the car, trying to make her aware of the fact that he was there. When he kicked the car, she did not acknowledge him. She did not even look up. She was that enraptured in her phone. So she ended up kicking him over into a lane that was stopped, and he hit the back of an SUV. When he did that, he broke his back. And at that point in time, when I had called the hospital, you know, like I said, I could hear my son in the background. I'm thinking, okay, whatever. And I asked if I could speak with him. And his friend gave him the phone. My son is talking to me saying, yeah, I hurt my back. I was in a motorcycle accident. I don't really know what happened, but, you know, I hurt myself. And I said, okay, what's happening? And he says, well, I'm going to have back surgery tomorrow. And then we start joking around about his lack of ability to drive a motorcycle. And I'm giving him a hard time. We get off the phone, and I'm thinking all is fine. About 15, 20 minutes later, I get a phone call again from the hospital, and it was his neurologist, the head of his neurology team. He asked me, are you coming down for his surgery tomorrow morning? We can't do surgery today because he's too swollen. And I said, no, I'm not planning on coming down. And he says, I don't think you understand the severity of your son's accident. If he makes it through the surgery, he will never walk again. And I just, oh my gosh, I just got off the phone with my son and he's joking with me. Needless to say, we found a house sitter, dog sitter, we found a place for my youngest son to stay, and we were on the road in 3 hours. We made it to the hospital directly after his surgery. So he had made it through the surgery, but the neurologist pulled me aside and he said, I just need you to know that we did not even try to repair his back. We just put it together because it was such a mush. So this has happened to us, and my aha moment is kind of bizarre. It involves cows, and it involves a spring snowstorm.
Imagine.
Yeah, exactly, probably the same one. So we had been going on with this accident. We had been building this apartment. We had been doing everything that we could to bring Cody home, because we knew if he stayed in California, he would be homeless. Paralyzed and homeless on the streets of California was not the ideal situation for him. So I'm driving to work, and it's the next spring. So it's a March snowstorm because there were little calves, and they were nursing from their mothers. And the snow, I kid you not, was like this. And it was blowing so hard, and it was so cold. And all of a sudden, I looked at those cows and I went, that's what we do. That is exactly what we do as a parent. We take the brunt of the storm so we can protect our children from anything that can happen to them. And it was such a powerful moment for me that I started crying and just bawling, like you can't breathe bawling. So I pulled over on the side of North Montana, and I am crying and crying. And one thing my son said to me in the hospital that I just couldn't accept was, after his surgery, he told me, I forgive her. And I said, you forgive who? I forgive the lady in that car. And I just froze. And in my mind, I'm thinking, excuse me? You forgive her? This woman, because of her stupid actions and selfish behavior, has prevented you from ever walking again, and you forgive her? How can you forgive her? Well, up until that point in time, I had been holding so much anger in my heart, and so much, I can't even describe how you can feel about somebody you've never met, because we never met her. She drove off after she ran him into the car. And so, as I'm crying, I know now is the time. So I start praying. And I pray for understanding. I pray for forgiveness. And I pray for peace. And at times I could not be around my son because I had panic attacks. If you're ever around somebody who will never walk again, that was such a vibrant football player, softball player, baseball, you see him and you're changing his diapers. And you know, this is it. This is his new life. It's catastrophic. It's painful. And above all else, at that point in time, I prayed for forgiveness in my heart to forgive this woman. And when I got done with my prayers and my tears, I felt like there's tomorrow. It's gonna only get better from here on out. I know that my son is going to thrive and to be a much better person than he was when he was in the accident. He had kind of connected with some not so fabulous people, let's just put it that way. And so when he got in this accident, he was doing things he maybe shouldn't have done. And we had this disconnect. When I came home, or when he came home, and at that very moment, when I knew he was going to be okay, it was life-altering. And my son now, the way I look at it is it did not paralyze him, it saved his life. Because I'm pretty sure he would have perished in some way, shape, or form with his friends. And now, he told me a couple weeks ago that he wants to go back to seminary school and become a pastor. So it's been a gift for us, a huge gift.
Wow, what an aha moment. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you so much. We'll come back to each of you too, so not to warn you or anything. Dr. Liz, you're up. Do you mind if I read your story?
No, I don't mind.
Thank you. After the 1-2 punch of divorce and losing her mother to breast cancer, Dr. Liz Dr. Liz Cavan put her career on hold and moved to New Mexico to care for her elderly father with dementia and deal with his estate. Her love for her father, a well of great memories shared with him, and immense gratefulness for all he did for her helped her to get through the hard times. And with the support of her loving siblings and longtime friends, Liz spent 2 hard but beautiful years caring for her father and organizing his estate with great success. Her relationship with her sister is now stronger than ever. Dr. Liz, would you mind sharing some of the strengths that you drew on internally within yourself that helped you get through this time?
Sure. I'm happy to do that. I want to give a little bit of background. I had graduated from naturopathic school and was practicing as a doctor for about a year, and my marriage started to fall apart, and I'm not going to go into the details there. And my mom also had breast cancer. My mom was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer at age 70, and I was in school when that happened, and she did really well for a long time, and then her health really started to decline. So my husband and I decided to do counseling for a year to see if we could patch our marriage. And in September of 2008, we decided in early that month that we were not going to stay married, that we were going to get divorced. And later that month, the day before my brother's birthday, my mom passed away from breast cancer. And so we always thought, my brother and my sister and I always thought that my mom would outlive my dad. And here we are with a father who has dementia. He still was alert. He knew who we were. He knew where he was. But he couldn't live alone. He couldn't use the remote. We were worried that he would leave the stove on. He couldn't work the microwave oven. And so I was newly divorced. I didn't have any children. My sister was raising her 2 children, and my brother was raising 4 sons. And my parents, unfortunately, had not planned for their future financially. And they had 2 mortgages on their house. They had a lot of debt. And there was no way that my dad could, he would have lost his home. And after talking with my siblings, it seemed like the obvious choice was for me to move back to Albuquerque, where I grew up, and live with my father. And my mom had collected a lot of things. She collected a lot of books and a lot of fabric, a lot of Christmas ornaments, lots and lots of things. And so I moved there, and it was really overwhelming. I remember when she was really at the last days of her life, I went to go see her, and my godfather had called me and he said, "You need to get here. Your mom is not doing well." And so I arrived, and every spare room in their house was full of stuff. There was no place for me to sleep. The beds were all covered with things. So I ended up making a pallet on the floor. And about 3 days after I was there, my mom passed. And fortunately, she was at home, and my sister was there, and my father was there, and it was really intense, and it was really beautiful. So about a month, I went back to Oregon where I was living, just got divorced, had my things that I needed to put in storage, did that, returned to New Mexico, and moved in with my dad. And the first thing I had to do was create a room where I could actually sleep and hang out. And I was so angry at times for being put in that position. And I remember my mom, she was this amazing seamstress, and she had this sewing room. And the sewing room had become this room of disarray, and it was just a huge pile of stuff. And I was standing on this pile of stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. This is intense. And I just remembered all the things that my parents did for me. When I was fortunate, my parents are very generous. They helped me with college, my brother and my sister. My dad would take me riding on his bike. He would take me, and he was really tall. He was 6'5". And we would go in the swimming pool, and I would hang on to it. It would be like hanging on to this big whale, and he would dive into the water, and I would hang on. And so those things made me think, okay, like Chanel said, the parents protect their children, and my parents did so much for me. It's like, now it's my turn. I'm gonna step up and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna help my dad and I'm gonna be grateful for all the things that were done. And I just started cleaning through all that stuff. And luckily I had my sister to help me. And I had some great moments with my dad. He was really funny. He was 83 when I moved in. And one morning, in the morning, you know, he would get up and I'd say, "Hey, good morning, Dad, you look really great." And he's like, "I can't help it." So I was fortunate because, you know, sometimes when people have dementia, they get angry and it's hard to be around them. And he was not like that. He was really funny, and so I was fortunate. So I think my aha moment probably was when I was in that fabric room. And it took me 8 hours to clear out that one room. But I think back and I just was like, okay, I'm gonna do this because I'm so grateful for what they did for me.
What a positive attitude to have, and to draw on your internal strengths to realize that. Thank you. I know, I just have one other question for you. We talked a little bit last night about some of the things that you're doing now for self-care. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Well, what I learned from when I lived with my dad is you really have to accept the help of others. We were really fortunate, and we met this woman who did a lot of estate sales, and she just showed up. I mean, my sister and I are like the primo yard sale women. We had so many yard sales. And so what I've been doing now, I recently did a women's self-love retreat in Boulder last weekend, and just trying to make time. I have a very busy schedule, and I'm a businesswoman and a naturopathic doctor, and it's easy to forget to take those moments. And so what I've been doing is taking moments in the morning and stretching and sitting, and when I get home, and just every night, not every night, I strive for every night to lay in bed and list all the things I'm grateful for in my life, and that helps a lot too.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And, excuse me, you knew what you were doing when you chose that chair, when you asked to move over there.
Yeah, sure, I'll be last. I don't know, it's kind of hard to follow this crowd though.
It is, I understand that. But do you mind, Mary, if I shared a little bit of your story?
Share it.
Okay. Raised in a small apartment by a single mother in Detroit, Michigan, Mary left home at age 16 and moved in with her older sister Susan to California, where they lived in a car and took showers at the free spigots on the beach. Soon, Susan found a job and a place for them to live and enrolled Mary in her senior year of high school. Mary always knew that college was out of reach. After successfully graduating high school, Mary spent the next decade working in the outdoors as a river guide, a ski patroller, and a wilderness ranger. Right.
Wow.
I wouldn't have guessed that. That's interesting. She was working for the U.S. Forest Service. Despite these accomplishments, Mary knew that college was her Everest. We all have that Mount Everest that we want to climb and top, don't we? It took Mary 10 years to put herself through undergrad. At age 32, Mary went to law school and shortly thereafter became a prosecutor. She is now Montana's Assistant Attorney General, prosecuting some of the most violent crimes in and around the state. She returns to the great outdoors as a part-time professional backpacking guide to reconnect with beauty in the world. Awesome. We have to have those ways to reconnect, don't we? Do you, Mary, mind sharing maybe some of the things that other people did along the way to help you regain your resilience and to strengthen it?
Sure. I think, I recognize a lot of people in the room, not everybody, of course, but many people in the room recognize me as an attorney with the Attorney General's office. And before that, I prosecuted locally at the county attorney's office. So some people see me in the newspaper or see my name, and in the newspaper they recognize my name and they just know me as an attorney. But this chair is too big for me. But I have this whole other story that a lot of people are unaware of. And basically, when I was 7 years old, I was going to school in Detroit, and I must have been acting up because my teacher brought me out in the hallway and said, "Now, Mary, just because your parents are getting a divorce doesn't mean you can act up." And I looked up, and I distinctly remember this. And I said, "What is a divorce?" So I learned what a divorce was, and I had I had an older brother and 2 sisters, and at that age, my parents got a divorce, and my dad moved into an apartment across town, into a studio apartment, and I went with my mother. One of my older sisters, she got married. She was like a teenager, got married, had some kids young, went off with her new husband, and my other sister got a job in an apartment on her own, and then my brother went off, and we lost track of him for a number of years, and he became a professional wrestler on TV. I'm not making this shit up. That is a true story, okay? Happened.
I love that.
Seriously. Yeah, his name was Italian Stallion, and we're not even Italian. Really a true story. So, and I moved in with my mother, and we were just financially insecure all those years. From, second grade on, I was the free lunch kid, but everybody was a free lunch kid where I grew up, so it was no big deal, right? And she would work, she kind of had different jobs. She worked at a hospital on her day job. She belly danced in the clubs of Detroit at night to make a little extra money. And let's see, where was I going with that? What was the question again? No, here we go. So I just grew up, and then somewhere in like my junior year of high school, she had kind of boyfriends here and there, or whatever. She wound up moving across the state of Michigan, and I didn't really want to leave my high school because I wouldn't know anybody. That's pretty normal for a teenager. So I went and found like a live-in nanny job, and I lived in the basement of this family's house. He happened to be an attorney, and that's kind of where I got the idea, like, hey, that'd be pretty cool. But then, after living there for, the rest of my junior year in high school, my older sister, the one that had the apartment and job and so on and so forth, she said, "I'm going to California." And I said, "What? All right, I'm going to go with you." So I went with my older sister, and we went to Southern California because, well, it's warm there. And she had a Dodge Omni. I don't know if anybody even knows what kind of car that is. Like a 2-door. Yeah, anybody that's my age would know what a piece of shit car this was. And so we made it out. We went out there, and we literally had nowhere to live. And sorry, I swear a lot. And we went around. We started out like in Huntington Beach. We went down to Newport. We kind of did Malibu. She was looking for a job. And then we lived in this car, and I can kind of remember sleeping in the Denny's parking lot, and this family was like, "Oh my gosh." They're looking in the window. They're like, "Oh my gosh, look at all the stuff in this car." And the kids are peering in, and I kind of like looked up. And they're looking down at me, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's people in there." And the mom is like, "Shh, they're sleeping. They live in that car." And the kids were like, and I was like, "Oh." And at that moment, I didn't even realize that was not normal. So I was 16 when this was going on, and I was living in this car. It wasn't very long. It was a month or so. And then my sister finally got a job, and we got a place to live, and bless her heart, she enrolled me in high school, and I went to Irvine High School with a bunch of girls. And when I sat down, I'm from Detroit, and I sat down, the girl next to me, her name was, I'm not kidding you, Sandy C. Shore. And I said, blonde hair, I've never seen anything like this in Detroit. And I said, "Oh yeah, hi, what's your name?" She told me, and I said, "Oh yeah." She goes, "I'm a child model." And I'm like, oh, okay, wow, I just was really out of place there. But I graduated. I did everything I could. My sister went to work and I went to school, and we were pretty normal. But I had nowhere to go, like, after that. And I just knew, like, I couldn't pay for college or anything, go to college, what was I gonna do? So I thought, what's the best thing you could do? What would be fun? Like, you have nobody is paying for you. My father's not gonna pay for school or give me any money to help me out at all. My mom totally was living with a boyfriend somewhere. She wound up moving to Malibu and living with a boyfriend there. And actually Pacific Palisades, which is close. But I thought, I'm gonna ask my sister if she would drop me off at Lake Tahoe on Labor Day weekend. And I asked her, and she said, okay. And so there I packed my bag. I literally had a duffel bag, okay? This is 1988. I had a duffel bag of clothes, and I had this in my head that I was gonna go up there, and there was no internet, nothing like that. I saw magazine photos, come to Lake Tahoe, and I saw this lake, and I saw mountains with snow-capped peaks and ski resorts, and whitewater rafting and all this stuff. I thought, that's what I want to be doing. If I can't go to school like normal people, I'm gonna go do something really cool. Watch this. So I worked 3 jobs during my senior year. I was like a bus person at the Big Boy, and I did stocking shelves at Liquor Barn, and I served frozen yogurt at one place till it burned down. And then I don't do it. But so on the weekend, Labor Day weekend came, and I got in the car with my bag, and she drove me up there, and I called every number in the newspaper and the classifieds, room for rent, room for rent, room for rent. I had about $1,000 with me, and nobody was answering because it was Labor Day weekend. Duh, everybody was on vacation. And so the last phone number, the plan was, my sister's like, all right, if this doesn't work out, I'm gonna leave you here with our tent, because we stayed the weekend in the tent. And so it's some little Kmart tent, and she's like, I'll just leave you at the KOA. You can keep looking for some place to live after I leave, because I gotta go back to work. All right. So last Sunday, she's getting ready to leave Monday. I call the last number, and some lady answers, and she says, yeah, no, she's not here. She's on vacation. The lady renting the room's on vacation. I'm just house sitting for her. And I begged this lady, I go, please, let me move in. Just, and she said, all right, you can move in, but if she comes back and she doesn't want you there, you're gonna have to move out. I said, I don't even care. I go, just let me stay there for the week. It was $200 a month, and I moved in there, literally slept on, move in meant I brought my duffel bag, and I went into the room. I had no bed. I had like a blanket, and I slept on the floor, and I had an alarm clock. And the next day, my sister drove away, and she drove 10 hours south back to Irvine, and I stayed in Tahoe. And I guess the thing that my sister did for me is I guess she always believed in me, and by helping me along the way, she, I guess, was a partner in crime in some fashion. She kind of enabled me, or by accountability, contributed to my life by just, number 1, being there, and number 2, not laughing at my crazy ideas, because I wanted to do this thing, and she just said okay, and my mom wasn't present enough to care one way or the other. My dad didn't care either, and yet she was always there to kind of show me the way. I mean, she's not an outdoor person, but she always supported me no matter what my ideas were, all the way through my life, including today. So
that kind of reinforces what we've been saying about just showing up, doesn't it? Just being present there for you. I have a question for you, Mary.
Sure.
You clearly had great perseverance within. Given you've been very transparent about your background, Where do you think that perseverance, that determination, where do you think that came from? Was that innate, or was that something you developed?
I feel like it was a matter of having no choice. So when you're backed into a corner and you have no other choice but to succeed, or if you fail, it's over. So I never really had anybody to catch me if I fell. I didn't have if I got arrested, I didn't have parents to call and say, bail me out. I would be in jail, you know, so I walked the line of being good the whole time because I had no choice. So it was just a matter of, you know, kind of being on your own. At 17, I was in Tahoe with nothing, and I had nobody to call on because I knew nobody there. So it's just a matter of keep staying with it. I think a little bit is innate, but I think a lot of it is learned too.
Thank you for being honest and open.
Sure,
with
I've
us.
never told this story out loud, just so you know. I really haven't.
I was going to give you all an opportunity to ask each other questions, but Amber, do you think at this time maybe we could allow some group questions instead? So if you have, our forum participants have been very open and transparent with us. If you have a question that you'd like to follow up on something that they have shared, we'll be happy to entertain that. I'm not promising that they'll answer, but we'll see. I see a hand back here.
Hi, this question is for Mary. It sounds like you've had to be your own cheerleader. You had your sister's support, but she didn't encourage you to be an attorney. How do you encourage yourself when you're the first in your family to be so successful?
You know, I just really always had a goal. I never, when I moved to Tahoe, it wasn't like, okay, this is my route to being an attorney, because it wasn't my goal at the time. But at the time, my goal was to make the best of my situation. And so best of that happened to be, taking the risk to go. And, I went straight to Tahoe. That year I got a job on ski patrol, and I was basically living the dream at that point. And so I rode that dream out until it kind of lived out its life, and then I came up with another dream. And that was going to undergrad. So, and I lived that dream out, and then I came up with another one. So it was a series of goals is the way I look at my life in chapters. So that was my motivation. Does that make any sense?
It does, beginning with the end in mind. You had that goal that you were shooting for.
I always do. My husband hates it because he's like, can't we just watch TV? But I'm always got like maps out, and I'm like, we're going here. Yeah. So goal-oriented, I guess.
And I have to confess, I actually have heard of the Italian stallion.
Oh my gosh. The mullet?
Now I know.
He had a mullet? Yeah.
Now I know.
Oh, so sorry.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to give some props to Liz for her presentation. I lost my parents in my early 40s, and I just think she deserves a round of applause for sharing her experience and giving such care of her parents.
Thank you. I kind of just did it. Just felt like I did what I would want somebody to do for me. But thank you for.
Awesome. Anyone else have a comment or a question? We've got one here.
To all of you, you're very courageous women that have surpassed, my goals in my life. I personally know Chantel and work with her on a daily basis, and her story amazes me. She's only touched on it. She didn't even go into details. You're amazing. Liz, my mother passed away last year from Alzheimer's, and she was in Washington State. And I have, my older sister and brother were the two that helped with her. My father's 90 years old right now, as sharp as a tack, but not physically as well as he could be. I live with the guilt of being someone who couldn't take care of my mother. You know, I work a lot of hours and couldn't go over to Washington all the time to see her. But I too remember moments of humor when she was in a memory care unit and with fences all around because they wandered off and whatnot, and she would say, "Hurry, get out of here, they're gonna keep you." You know, little things that make me smile, and for you to take care of your father that way, that's amazing.
Thank you. I'd like to just say one thing. Humor makes a huge difference. So if you can find humor in hard situations, that's really, really helpful. But, you know, I have some regret as well regarding my mom, because when my mom had breast cancer, I was in naturopathic medical school, and my sister was the one who was helping my mom. And in retrospect, I really wished I had called my mom more and just checked in with her. And she came and visited me in Oregon when I was in school, and we had some wonderful times at the beach. But when she got more sick, sometimes I feel guilty for not reaching out to her more and just making that phone call, and I would just encourage people to do that. So that's what I have to say about that.
Good advice, excellent advice.
Mary, I promised that I would ask you a hard question, so here it is. I see this in you anyway, because I know you personally. I see the grit in you, and now I kind of know where it came from. But I'm short of homelessness and the adversity that you had in your childhood. I also see the grit in your kids, Cameron and Kennedy. And I'm wondering how you instill that grit in them without the homelessness and living in the Dodge Omni and all of that as well. So can you share some of that with us?
That's a good question. All I can say is I'm a mean mom. Mean. Ask them. The true story, though, I really make them do everything. So I don't cut them any slack. So that's true. So, did I answer that?
I just want to say one thing really quick before I ask my question. Did WLN not hit this out of the park today? They did an amazing speakers. I get to go and hear a lot of conferences and a lot of speakers, and this was, you guys, outstanding. So pat yourselves on the back. Good job. But this question's for Magdalene. I'm really curious, you went to Carroll and then you decided to stay. You didn't go anywhere else, you're right here in Helena. Was there anything that made that, why did you stay?
Do we have a mic? Can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Testing.
So when I came to Carroll and had the baby,
That's not
Can you
right.
hear me? Is that better? Okay. During the time I was at Carroll, after I had my daughter, America put in a program called the Refugee Resettlement Program. And anyone who had a relative in America that was either permanent resident or U.S. citizen could file for their family member. And I couldn't file for my husband because I was a student, but the baby could parallel relearn. So we filed for my husband with my baby footprints. And that's how he was able to come on that resettlement program. And so he joined us 2 years and 7 months as a refugee, and we regularized our papers to permanent resident in a year, and then in 2001 we became United States citizens. So that's why I stayed, because I wanted a better future. Liberia was still upside down. The war continued until 2006. It is home away from home. I wouldn't trade my childhood growing up in Liberia. I got a lot of qualities from there. But America is home now.
Why Helena? Why did you stay?
I came to Helena as an exchange student, and when Wilma joined me in 1994. And after I graduated from Carroll in 95, I was looking at jobs in other states, and he said, Maddie, if we move out of Montana, we'll go into Alaska. So, in other words, we're not leaving Helena.
And can I just say that you and Wilmot have been a gift to the Helena community.
We love Helena.
I have one more question before we wrap up today's forum, and the question is for Sue. Something that I'd love to see more women in the sciences and agriculture and mathematics. I'd love to see part of the WLN. And so do you have any, for the handful of women here that are working in male-dominated fields, do you have any suggestions or advice for them as they build their careers?
Well, I think that, this is kind of hard one, isn't it? I think that you have to be smart enough. First of all, we're all smarter than them anyway, right? But you just have to, you have to go in, you can't go in hard. I always have felt like I'll give you my aha moment just super fast. And that was when we decided that we needed to, our cattle ranch was kind of expanding, and we had to get a reliable truck. Because even though all those ranchers, it always looks like they're driving fancy trucks, it's just because you have to have a reliable truck, because you do not want to break down on the highway with a load of cows. So I do my research, and I'm going around to the different dealerships looking for a 3/4 ton diesel truck. So I'm sitting there talking to him, and there's this guy at the Ford, I'm just saying, it's a Ford dealership, and he's like, okay, well this, he's showing me all the bells and whistles, and I'm like, I want the one with the rubber mat, and he's like, well this has got like navigation. I'm like, well I want a rubber mat. I want like the hose out stuff, because it's like, I really don't need carpet because we have like manure. And then he says, hey little lady, is there like a man at home that's gonna help with this decision? And that's when I said, you just lost your sale, because I am out of here. But really, I feel like once you learn what you're doing, I can sit on the Naugahyde seats at the parts counter with grease under my fingernails and commiserate with the guy sitting next to me and buy the bearings for my baler and so forth. And after a while, those guys actually respect you, and they like you, and they believe in you, which is really interesting. And then they come to you for advice and so forth too. So anyway, how's that? Is that good enough, Amber?